Welcome to ME Paranormal Weekly. Our guest is Pamela Livingstone. She's a spiritual medium. Today we're going to be talking about ghosts and poltergeists and shadow people and everything that goes bump in the night. Listener discretion is advised due to subject matter. Please, don't let your younger folks listen to this. And yeah, welcome to the podcast, Pamela. Can you give us a statement?
Well, thank you for having me, Harold. I'm happy to be here on your show. I've listened to your couple of your shows already, and they've been very informative. And I hope to be just as informative tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's start out with some basic questions. First, what is a ghost?
A ghost is, in my interpretation, is a residual energy that tends to linger in a space. Um, it can linger in belongings of a lost loved one, a departed loved one. It can linger in places that has had disturbing events happen, troubling events, a lot of disruptive energy.
Yeah,
Um, that energy can get trapped, and is really the interpretation of a ghost. When a ghost translates, what that is energetic residue.
yeah. And I know that there are several types of ghosts. I know that we've seen active ghosts. We've seen sort of the recording playback kind of ghosts. Uh,
Hmm.
we've seen the ones that kind of hide and try to take other shapes in order for you not to see them.
Yeah.
Can you kind of give us a rundown on the types? Like I just mentioned a few, but can you give us a rundown on what they are? How come they end up in that situation? Like for instance, say residual hauntings. Why does that occur?
A lot of times the residuals again happens because of an energetic, it's an energetic transfer, usually through again something disturbing happening, something energetically traumatic happening within the walls of a confine of a building, of a house, or a room, even just a singular room, um, with belongings. It can be the personal belongings of someone, the energy of that person, the energetic imprint, the energy signature, if you will, gets entrapped in that belonging, in
Hmm.
that material. Um, like you said, ghost is a very broad blanket term. It
Right.
covers so many different types. But what it boils down to is an energetic transfer, um, that is released through human contact initially, and then ends up stored, and it gets stirred up either through when another person comes into contact with that object, or begins living in that house or in that room. That energy can get stirred up for any number of reasons, that the energy is attracted to, or it's a match for that. They share the vibration, um,
Right.
same similar energetic signature, and it's a match. Not always do the ghosts get become active because of, because someone is present. They can be very quiet. Other times they get very disturbed and riled up.
Right. And so basically, these ghosts, these residual hauntings, um, they're not really there. They're just like a recording that loops over and over again.
Exactly. What you're seeing is sort of a replay of an energetic pattern that will recur
Right.
over and over. Not always in the same fashion, but a lot of times you'll get the same feeling from that. Like you can walk into the room and know that this is so and so, this is that person, this is that quote ghost, um, because it's a certain energetic vibe. It's a feel.
Right, right. And these things have been reported, at least I've heard, to be more prevalent in places where they have like quartz in the ground or water nearby. It tends to somehow affect it.
It's
Uh,
very much a conduit. Yes, the water is a conduit of for energy of all
right.
type.
Yeah.
Um,
But specifically, this kind of haunting is a non uh, affected haunting. In other words, it just replays. It doesn't know you're there. It has no idea. There's no consciousness involved.
exactly.
Yeah. So they're just basically ghost movies.
Yes,
So to
it's the visuals and the home movies of the ghost.
right,
Yes.
basically that's what that is. Now we're dealing with a actual haunting. Um, where the ghost is aware of what's going on. Uh, I know that there's always reasons behind this. Can you kind of do you know basically? Can you give us a rundown on why they would stay there as opposed to going on or moving on to whatever their
There's a number of reasons they would linger. Sometimes they aren't aware that they've even crossed over. That um, given the circumstances of their death, they may not even be aware that they've crossed over. That happens on occasion, on many occasions, where they get earthbound or trapped, and they sort of stick around, especially if it's a place that they had a soul connection to, um, a deep, heartfelt, more of a heartfelt connection. Um, other reasons would be if a loved one who maybe follows you or is by you because you were dear to them. You were dear to that person, that sort of thing.
right, right. And I've also heard that another reason would be that some violent thing occurred and the personality that caused it refuses to move on and tries to hold its victims.
Oh, that yes, that is also a very strong motive for lingering, because given the nature again of the person who may have committed these horrendous acts, depending on what they are, would want to continue that even in even in the afterlife.
Right.
It's
Have you
um,
ever encountered this?
I'm pretty sure not so intense as that, but other circumstances where I think I may have one time told you about the uh, house that I lived in that was the facade was built out of the stones from an old church in Alabama that exorcisms took place.
Wow.
That was uh, that was intense. Those that energy that was obviously pulled out in during those sessions was there's a fine example of energy getting trapped. Stone in particular is a very oh well we'll say porous in the way that it will absorb energy. As you know, when you charge a crystal with energy, how effective that can be. Well, it's the same premise. When you basically charged all those stones with all of that energy, those exorcisms. So yes, that residue definitely lingered, to say the least. It made for an interesting, you know, teenage years, early teenage years for me.
Right, right. So as a spiritual medium, you've been called to remove different kinds of things from houses, buildings, land, um, and you obviously do different. I don't want to say rituals, different kinds of things to remove these different entities, ghosts, what have you. Can you just tell my audience a little bit of how you would go about doing your investigation and removing the entity itself?
Well, every case is obviously very individual, and it requires making sure that the entity is something that is even willing to leave or depart from where it is. It could be that entity is not even attached to the place, as we've probably discussed in in previous times, that the entity is attached to the person
Right,
and will follow them no matter where. Um, that requires other type of work to be done on a personal level for the individual. Um, as far as investigating, what I would do is I would go in and investigate the premises, the perimeter, go in and get a feeling for the energy in the room and or the house or the vehicle or the land,
yeah,
depending, and just determine, like I said, whether it is an entity, whether it's sometimes I've encountered portals that are interdimensional that have nothing to do with ghosts at all. That's a whole other ball game, though. Um, Interdimensional beings are there's so many of those that would probably be another show altogether.
right,
But so I go in and I determine what I'm dealing with, what the clients have been dealing with. We have a conversation usually about what type of things have taken place, and we go from there. And I don't use a lot of ritual. I'm uh, I'm very straightforward in the way that I approach is a lot of things, more on the energetic telepathic level, um, using methods that I was trained to do at the spiritual school that I attended.
right, right. Um, Now, um, after you determine what the situation is, so for instance, uh, obviously we're not going to cover interdimensional portals at this point, but is there a way for you to actually close these portals and so that they don't continue to uh, spew forth whatever into the environment?
Yes, they can be closed and sealed. Um, that requires that requires some energetic work. With the clients,
Right.
we gather and it's it's very personal
Okay.
when we gather to close these portals, or really any of these sessions that I do. It's very personal, and it's very hard to describe each and every.
I understand. I'm not asking, the personal data or whatever. Just I was just trying to get a feel for that these things can be closed and that it's not um, so hard to actually do because I've encountered several uh, of the Mandela affected community that had portals of different kinds in their houses, and they were trying to figure out how to close them. And I think one time they used mirrors to close them. Another time it was using spiritual energy to close them. Um, and so I was just trying to get a generalized view of it. You know what I mean? So that people did know, yes, it is possible to close these things.
Right. There it is. It's very possible, and there are many techniques involved. Mirrors, uh, energetic. There's prayer. There's chanting. There's candle work. There's many approaches to closing a portal.
Right, right. Um, all right. So let's move on to our next topic, if you will, poltergeist. Um, this is a broad term. It's obviously been made famous by a couple of movies. A little girl saying, "They're here,"
Yeah.
and a lot of Hollywood techno stuff. But realistically, in dealing with poltergeist, what causes them?
Well, that goes back to the energetic loop. That's a lot of an energetic loop, but a lot of times they're just irritated. they're but they have no conscience. They just have no. They just want to make a show, let you know they're there. They're the term poltergeist is a German for playful ghost. They're although we can interpret that as well, are they really playful? They're kind of they're mischievous for sure. Noisy ghosts.
Yeah, I've heard of a few, and I've actually witnessed it myself.
Yes,
Uh,
yes,
things getting thrown across the room.
definitely. They a few things. I've really only encountered a poltergeist myself probably twice in my life, so I've
Yeah,
been really lucky about that. But I do know people who have, and uh, now one time I was sitting with my grandmother at her her cousin's house, and they were arguing, of all things, about religion,
right.
and they're we're sitting there, and this decanter, a crystal decanter, comes flying off of the china cabinet, the top
Wow,
of the china cabinet, and shattered in the middle of the kitchen floor.
wow,
And I mean, it flew a good 20 feet,
wow.
and it was definitely, there was no denying it. And needless to say, they got quiet.
I bet.
Argument was over. They weren't arguing anymore after that.
No. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen uh, one of these things change channels on TV. Um, as I said, I've seen them throw things across the room, um, and I get the distinct feeling that this energy is charged by teenage angst, so to speak.
Oh yes.
Go
Uh,
ahead, please.
Teenagers, especially young boys, for some reason, and this is a common thing is with young boys around age 12 to 13, and it's been said that it's the hormonals that go on in young boys at that age,
Yeah.
but they tend to trigger it. I know that with my son, my oldest son, that happened to him. Um, a lot. In fact, um, was the things flying off the shelf, and
Yeah.
that was when he would stay at his father's primarily. Not so much when he was with me, but
Right.
at his father's, yes, he would experience that quite a bit. And his father would say, "What is that? What is going on?" And I would explain to him, "Well, I think that it's just where he is in the age, and it tends to set that off." And
Right.
yeah, he was the only one of my kids that had that experience, though. The boys and or the girls, really, you know.
Yeah. I I saw it when my daughter was growing up in her teen years. Things would fly around a little bit, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of visual um, kind of things like people walking down the hallway, or uh,
Right.
somebody getting kicked at the stairs. You know, my daughter actually got hit at the stairs. We used to put a board across the stairs, and there was two clips, one on either side. And one day I forgot to do it, and my daughter was walking along, and something pushed her into the board, and the board went bobsledding down the stairs. She thought it was hilarious. I mean,
Hmm.
she was
Hmm.
riding it all the way to the bottom. She said, "Could she do it again?" But I said, "No."
Hmm. No, we.
Yeah, I think it was in a poltergeist. I'm pretty sure.
Hmm.
Um,
It has a distinct energy. I know that it did for me when I didn't really think of it at the time, but it could have been. I was at that age too. I was about 12, but and I was just sitting there listening. When I told you about them arguing about religion, I was about 12, sitting in the room with them, and that's when that happened. Um, I remember thinking they really are getting loud, and I would just want them to be quiet, but but then again, I don't think that was me that did that. I'm pretty sure it was another energy.
right. Yeah. I like I say, I've seen it. I've heard that this is the case. That for some reason, teenage energy energizes these things. Now, I don't believe that they're conscious. I don't know if they're conscious, or if it's just the anger or the energy that's involved takes on its own life, like a what do they call them? Oh, um, topa, a topa.
Hmm.
Like it's actually created by the energy itself, and it's sort of an energy being, and it really doesn't have a thought process. It just kind of
It,
does.
it kind of exists and lives off of that energy. Uh,
Right.
that's all. It that's really all that's behind it. It really has no motive at all either. At
Mm,
all. It's just pure energy. I mean, not necessarily pure in its actions because it really is it's undirected. It doesn't have any direction at all. It just serves to really kind of freak a lot of people out.
right. Right.
That's really all it does. It's kind of an empty energy, if you will, if that makes any sense.
Sure. I like I say, I think it's created without a purpose, and because of that, it just kind of does whatever. It reacts to
Yeah, it's errant kind of here and there, and
right whatever energy is in the room. It reacts to that energy. If it's anger, then it kind of does something, throwing things around.
yeah, it's almost a mirror in a way
Right, right. Um,
of
but
that.
it's definitely not what you saw in the movies.
No.
That was for Hollywood's purpose, and it had nothing to do with that. That was more a ghost than a poltergeist. Um, poltergeist, uh, at least again, my understanding, have been that they just exist for the sake of existing, and after the children leave a certain certain length of time, I guess the energy dissipates, um, unless it's connected to an item, like you said before. These
Right.
things, this energy can connect to an item, some sort of a stone, a ring, uh, even a crystal. And if the crystal's not cleared, it can continue.
Exactly. That's absolutely right. It
Um,
will continue
yeah,
if it's not cleared. It will just keep occurring. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, so let's move on to our final topic. This is going to be the grand finale, so to speak. We're going to talk about shadow people, and I'm sure everybody's had some kind of experience, or if you haven't, you've heard about it. Um, but yeah, can you give us your take on shadow people?
Well, encountered several different kinds of shadow people. There's the first kind that I first became aware of was what is, I suppose, affectionately known as Hat Man. A lot of people have seen Hat Man. He's come to be known as Hat Man. He's obviously wears a hat, and some have reported seeing him smoking a cigarette. Even um, others have seen him wearing a hat and a trench coat. They can make the outline of a trench coat, but he's definitely wearing a hat for sure. He tends to he moves rather slowly. He's not like the little ones that remind me of little gremlins and kind of little toddler type, running amok. More than anything, they're almost they seem mischievous in a way. Like as soon as you see them, they kind of vanish. They don't. When as soon as they realize they've been seen, what it is, at least in my experience, I had several of them run towards me through my front door recently. Um, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute, fellas, we're not doing this right now. And then poof, they were gone. Uh, but and then there's the observer type that kind of just stand back and watch. They don't really have anything to communicate. They don't have anything. Um, they don't send off any kind of vibe. They're not threatening at all. At all. They just watch. They seem to be interested in observing more. That's it. And then there's the other type that it's been said they might be in disguise. They are a little more intimidating. They want to sort of feed off of your fearful energy. If you display any fear, they'll want to feed off of that and linger longer and kind of goad at you and make you angry.
Right. And these are the types that you experienced. I know that shadow people are a big topic nowadays,
Yeah.
and I know that they're always talking about uh, different kinds, different experiences, different looks to them. Some of them could be smaller, bigger, whatever. Um, my own experience has just been that they're the types you're talking about, the one that's fearful, that makes you fearful. I don't think that's a ghost. I mean, I don't think it's a shadow person. I think it's uh, something else masquerading. It's
Right.
it,
Right.
now. Have you actually experienced one of those?
I there was one I was reading in bed one night, and there was one hovering up in the corner of the room on near the ceiling, and I had never really seen one at that level before. Usually they're, more at, standing from the floor up. They're not up by the ceiling or up in the air at all,
Right.
And that was the first. And I have encountered that one probably twice in this apartment that I'm currently living in. Of course, this building I'm living in is disturbed anyway. It's got some history going on. It used to be a hotel, and Al Capone used to stay here, and it was, so it was pretty active, and so there was some activity here, and there was a fire here in 1985. 16 people were perished in that fire, and there have been other things that have happened in the building that people have passed away, obviously,
Yeah.
um, but this apartment, as far as the shadow people, that type of shadow, um, yeah, twice reading in bed one night, and it was hovering by the ceiling, and I kept saying, you really need to go, and I would glance up, and it would still be there, and I could see it out of the corner of my eye, and I felt myself getting more angry and more agitated, and not fearful, because I don't let those things scare me anymore. I think I was just getting really, I felt myself getting very angry, and I thought, you know what, that doesn't feel right, and yeah, you really got to go. And so I started chanting. I use a chant that sends them away. Um, it was very resistant, though. It took a good 45 minutes to get it to completely leave. It tried to come back several times in the same night. It would try to sneak in. I was, no, you know what? You're persistent, and this is different than any of the other shadows I've seen. Um, I did experience one here one night, totally different, even from that one, and even different from the little gremlin type. Which this one was really tall. It was probably 7 feet tall, and it had an essence of a male essence, and I did get that distinctly, but it certainly didn't try to communicate anything. It was very, again, observant, just, but also very persistent. It
Right.
wouldn't leave right away. It was standing at the foot of my bed and just would not leave. No, and so I started chanting again, and that's usually very effective. And
Right.
it didn't leave right away. And the same kind of, no, I didn't get as agitated. I just to myself, well, this is, you know, again, this is one of those persistent ones, only a different type of energy attached with it.
Right. So
So
did
that's been my experience with those here. Before that, I would say I've experienced just at a distance, and there was a wooded lot that was behind the apartment that I used to live in before this one,
mm,
and I would see them along that tree line. And I know it sounds like, oh, well, it could have been the trees, but I had other people that would visit, and we'd sit out on the porch on occasion. And it would be like, is there somebody standing over there? And I'd say, oh, yeah, yeah, that's what I call them, the watchers. I didn't know what else to call them except the watchers, because that's all they did was just sort of sit and watch. And they just kept their distance.
so what do you think they are? Are they benevolent, uh, neutral?
Those are neutral. Those to me are very neutral. At least the watcher ones are very neutral. They don't seem to have any malicious intent at all. Um, the other ones, I'm not so sure. The one that hovered near the ceiling, I can't be so sure that was, like you said, it was something else
Yeah.
that appeared as, I think, something trying to disguise itself, like you
Right.
said.
Yeah. Possibly, one of those dimensional entities.
Yeah, yeah. Thank goodness it didn't stay long enough for me to have to analyze it any further. And I'm really not inviting it back. So,
No.
No, I'm really not interested in having that whole
Yeah,
interaction again.
especially at night when you're tired and you're laying in your
No, no, I'm not interested. Thank you.
yeah, right. Yeah, our listeners, I'm sure, have had to deal with some form of these things, and that's why we're here. We're trying to get a handle on what they are and how to get rid of them. Could you give us a little tutorial, if you will, on how to get rid of these things if they show up in their houses?
The shadow people?
The shadow people, yeah.
Oh, well, since I'm fairly new at the shadow people myself, I'm not sure I could give a tutorial exactly about how to get rid of them. I do know that remaining calm is the first and foremost. You do not want to exhibit fear of any sort, and usually, like we've said with the shadow people, you don't have to. You don't. You don't have to be fearful of them because they're not. They don't have any. They're not. They're not malevolent, like you said. They're not.
Yeah,
They're just very neutral.
right.
Um, Even with anything else, you still don't want to exhibit fear because that is only something that any any kind of negative entity would want to feed off of anyway. So you definitely don't want to exhibit fear when it comes to them at all. Um, Now, for me, I know that what I have done in the past when I have sensed an energetic being around me that I didn't necessarily want in the room with me, that I didn't invite, which, that's a whole other show probably too, is when I do invite them for a seance, I do invite them. That's a
Right,
whole another show. Um, but to keep them at bay, using candles is always good. If you're into the, the white candle is the the best at with for protection. It's a very basic general protective type of candle. I utilize candle work more than anything probably. Um, then besides crystals, which amethyst is a good protective type crystal. There's others, tiger's eye. There's plenty of different crystals that can be utilized as well. But I would say that probably the simplest is a white candle, and a simple prayer. A simple prayer is effective
okay. Thank you.
without getting too technical.
Right, right. And finally, there's one last kind of shadow person that I want to deal with. Now, we dealt with this topic last week, but I just want to bring it up, uh, and that is demons tend to hide and be
Uh-huh.
shadows. Um, have you ever experienced that?
I have at a starting at around age 13 through the age of 17. I lived in the house where the exorcisms were, the stone facade where the exorcisms were performed at the church. The stones were from that church.
Right.
Yeah, that story I told earlier. Um, that house was definitely something for harboring the demonic energy. Then also there's the type that follow people around, like Ty was speaking about, the type that follow people. That was the case with my mother. She tended to attract that type of energy. Um, that that entity would hang around and prey on her, and mainly her. But as soon as she would leave to go to work every early morning before the sunrise,
Hmm.
and I would be there home alone, and yeah, it would turn to me to see if there was any, if I would play along, and It did a number on my fear. I didn't know any better at age 13 than to not be afraid. Yeah, I was afraid. I'm not gonna lie, but it was um it was an intense time for sure. It's hard to discuss though. It's really hard to talk about.
I understand. I understand. Well, we won't push it, but I just wanted to bring that up because it's in the form of a shadow person. They can appear.
They can. They really can. And their whole mission though is to deceive and to their energy is just they're not out for good, that's for sure. So they're definitely going to try to trick you up front and make you think that they're not as that they're not as harmful as they might try to appear harmless, in other words, or neutral, which they are not.
Yeah, they can appear as shadows or children or animals.
Animals, yes, and that's definitely something that I've experienced is the animal demon. that's a that's a tough one though. It is really a difficult topic though.
Right, right. Well, I just wanted to gloss over it. I mean, I didn't want to actually linger on it, but only to say that yeah, they can be uh, appear as shadow people as well, and they can mimic other things, hauntings or whatever, just to scare people. And their whole thing is benevolence and fear, and they too feed off the fear. So
Oh yes, they feed off of the fear, and it makes them that much stronger.
right, and they can also attach to people and places.
Follow you from place to place, and yeah, um, indeed they can and will. They don't hesitate to.
No, no, they don't.
We've moved, and they would follow us to the next location.
which which was a very annoying. Uh,
Yeah,
I've experienced something of that nature, and I can tell you it's not fun. Well, is there some? Do you have like an email address that they could contact you, Pamela, if somebody has questions or?
sure. It's a extra light one, like XTRA, the light LITE 1, extra light one at hotmail.com.
Okay, and if you guys have any questions, uh, you know, if you have problems, situations, feel free to contact Pamela, and she'll do her best to answer your questions or your problems. And as always, you can contact me at on my messenger, or if you need to, you can contact me on my email is SOARINGHAWKE 38 If you have any ideas, comments, whatever. So thank you, Pamela. Uh,
Thank you, Harold. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge with everybody. And yeah, that's it. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I'll have a new episode next week. Bye.